Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, wherever you're coming from across the country. Welcome to Food Processing Skills Canada's webinar series that we call Speaking Food. We think we have a really good one for you today around immigration. I was just doing a presentation with a few, heavy hitters around immigration with Honorable Perrin Beatty from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and Craig Alexander, former TD economist, and immigration was a hot topic there, and where our labor is coming from, in the next 7 years, 10 years. We know that the number is large that we're looking to bring into the country, which I'm sure Sherri will get to. It's over 400,000 for this year, but we're hoping they get in and get through, and we have enough people to process all those applications and so forth. But we know that if this is not part of your recruitment strategy, you definitely need to get on board with it. We really want to help navigate these waters and see what the potential value is in foreign recruitment and how you can get them on board, even as a smaller maybe business and that. So we have a great team here with you today. You'll see if our tech crew is there as well. We have Marwan and Geneva who are there, and Tracy is a senior project manager for our Achieving Workforce Destination program. So all there, if you need anything, you can chat with them at the back end. So I'd like to introduce you to Sherri Deveau. She's a wealth of knowledge, and she's the founder of Deveau Immigration and is a regulated Canadian immigration consultant and a chartered professional in human resources. We have known her for a good while. She's been a friend and a great consultant with Food Processing Skills Canada many, many years back. She's passionate about the food industry. That's kind of one of her first loves in her areas, and knows all about foreign missions, recruiting for our industry. So please welcome me in joining Sherri Deveau with us today.
You're on mute.
Sorry, you're on mute, Sherri.
Oh, Sherri.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I was just saying, you said it all, Jen. That's amazing. That's great. I am passionate about this, and so I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for Food Processing Skills Canada for allowing me this platform. I come with a bit of experience in the background when it comes to education. But really what I really want to point out before I move on is that experience from an HR perspective in a food processing facility really has given me, the kind of the business acumen and the understanding of what you're exactly going through. I've been through it. I started back in the day with my first foreign recruitment mission way back in early 2000s. We've learned a lot since then. I think that's probably what kickstarted me wanting to jump into the world of immigration. So, I really want to be able to support you here today, and that's a part of my mission. We have a lot to unpack, so we'll get started. Before we move further, though, I really wanted to introduce two of my guests today. I've invited along for this ride because I think they have a lot to offer. Darcy Lynch, she's with Levitate HR Strategies. Darcy and I as well go way back. We've actually went on the same some immigration recruitment missions for food processors years ago. We were probably one of the 2 or 3 companies back in that day that really started immigration to be in large volumes, if you will, coming in to work for food processors. So Darcy's going to work with us to talk to you a little bit about his experiences in those food processing industries, some of the immigration streams that he used, and he'll come on later to do that. Also, I'm very pleased to have Deepa with me from Sage Immigration. Deepa has a lot to offer. She could do this actually presentation if she needed to. She has a wealth of experience. She's an immigration consultant, and on top of that, she's actually able to participate and do do immigration efforts in Quebec, which is a separate license you need to have. And another interesting point about Deepa, she's bilingual, and I think she's certainly a good asset for us here today. If any of you have questions about the Quebec immigration process, and or you have a question you want to ask in French. So thank you both, Darcy and Deepa, and you'll get a chance to meet them in a few minutes. So look, I want to kickstart this off by asking you some questions first, okay? We got a poll for you, and I'm going to ask you if you would just simply participate a yes or no answer. And Marwan's going to put it up on the screen for you. And the answer, or the question is, have you used immigration personally to fill your vacant position? So maybe your organization has used immigration in the past, but have you personally been involved in an immigration process in your company in the past? Yes or no? I'm not able to see the polls coming in, but I'm assuming they're coming in, Marwan.
Yeah, they are coming in. We're at 82% have
Awesome.
participated. So you want to close it out now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So with the 82%, how many we are looking at? 53% said yes, and 47% said no. That's almost an even split. That's a very interesting split, and I think in both camps, I'm confident you'll learn something here today. So thank you for participating. We will be going through a couple of those polls, and that really is for me to understand, some of your background as we go along. Some of the information I may skim over a little bit quicker if I think that you're sort of up to speed in that area. So we'll move on to the next slide, and that is my goals for today. First and foremost, I want to start off by telling you normally I'll stand and do a lot of presentations, and that's how I'm motivated. I walk the stage. Today, I promise I'll try not to leave my seat, but I may be a bit animated. So I'll leave you with that first. My goals though for over the sessions is really to provide you with some insight on immigration. It's a lot of information. However, I've pulled out some things that I think you'll find some value in. So to provide you with that insight and information on immigration, to share my experiences, and as well, Darcy and Deepa will share some of theirs potentially. And most importantly, leave you with food for thought. By the time you leave here today, I'm hoping that you'll have a bit of a direction on where you'd like to move if you're interested in joining and moving in an immigration journey direction. But as I said earlier, it's a lot to unpack. The immigration system is huge, and we cannot put this all together in 1 hour session. However, we will be giving you a lot of information that you can take away and build your own immigration plan. We'll leave you with a lot of that, again, food for thought. I have a secret for you though. Whatever we don't cover today, Jennifer will speak to you later today about a project that the an immigration project that the food processors are pulling together to support the food processors in Canada. So stay tuned for that. I think you'll find it'll be helpful for you. So today's agenda. The first agenda of the today will be to look at certainly the labor market. We're going to touch a little bit on that. Canada's view on immigration is one of the biggest points I'd like to drive home today. I think it's important to understand the backdrop of the background of immigration in order to understand what's in front of you. Immigration programs, there's a lot of them, guys, and we're not going to be able to touch on all of them, but what we will do is help you understand how to look at them, how to view them, how to find them, and give you some helpful hints on using immigration programs within your organization. The biggest topic of all, I'm sure, is processing timelines. We will touch on processing timelines. I'll give you my feedback on ways to find processing timelines, look at ways to maybe impact processing timelines. We'll look at best practices from experiences that I've seen along the way, and certainly leave you with some resources to help you. So do you have any vacant positions? Yes or no? Time for a poll. If I know most of the labor market, what's happening out there, many of you have vacant positions today, but it'd be interesting to know if they're current or if you've been filling them recently. So yes or no, do you have vacant positions?
So we got the questions trickling in. You can open for a bit more. 66
Yep.
participated so far. Okay. So I'm gonna close it out now.
Sure, close it out. Thanks.
There you go.
Wow. 74% of people have vacant positions. And I'm assuming the 20%, 26% that don't, they expect that they will in the near future. Just given what Jennifer said, and we'll touch on a little bit of the labor market in a few minutes, this isn't going away, guys. And I'm glad you're here today to at least understand how immigration can help support you on that. Thank you, Marwan.
No worries.
So let's talk about the labor market challenges. If you joined Eddie last month on his labor market presentation, it was amazing. And he really did talk really in depth and help people understand a lot more about this crazy labor market that we're in. I'm going to touch on it very quickly. He talked a lot about the retirement rate. It's a big one. It's a big one. In fact, I'm going to pause here for a second to give you a statistic that I heard a couple of days ago that was very startling. If you were to compare the ratio from a retiree to a worker, the ratio used to be 1 retiree to every 7 workers. What we're experiencing now, guys, is 1 retiree to every 3 workers. That's very scary. And what I'm hearing is that's even going to drop further to 1 retiree to every 2 workers. So if that doesn't give you motivation to want to start thinking about immigration, I don't know what will. Birth rates are low, and Eddie talked about this at great lengths in terms of, why, how that's affecting our labor market. And certainly out-migration is a piece of it. People are not only leaving the country to experience other countries, but also people are actually leaving and going out to different provinces, which leave the other provinces a bit of a challenge with labor markets, in their labor market. In speaking to food processors, however, I was interested to understand what they're doing to actually work in this crazy, challenging labor market. And some startling things came out of that, and one was outsourcing. Food processors are actually sending their products out to other companies to be able to produce for them as a third party because they are unable to produce based on not enough people. What's even more challenging to hear is that some of those outsourcing are happening outside of our country. So going into other countries. So from an economic development perspective, that could be startling to a lot of us. Downsizing, companies are actually saying no to new products, saying no to new customers because they simply just don't have the people to be able to pull this off. Automation is needed, but it's costly. A lot of food processors have, some are dabbling in automation, but a lot of them are telling us it's just a costly venture, and so they're hesitant to do it. Immigration seems to be the answer here. A lot of organizations are starting to think about immigration, and I hope that after today, we'll give you a little bit of information to help you start on your immigration journey. So when you're faced with an option, know that immigration is an option. It can seem daunting, and I'll be the first to tell you that it's complex. But there's when you get involved in immigration and you understand your pathways and you start experiencing over and over these certain pathways, you'll get used to it. So let me help you through that. You're sitting there going, well, what is next? Where do I start? How do I start? Well, let's start with this. It's important to understand Canada's view on immigration. I'll tell you why. When I started my journey in immigration, I was so excited. Remember, working in food processing, working as an HR person, trying to fill vacant positions for decades. I understood how pivotal, the immigration journey could be for organizations. And so I went out on my own journey to help spread the word around companies that I knew to say, you really should try immigration. What the feedback that I was getting was a bit unnerving, and it was a couple of different things. One being, people would come back, organizations would come back and say to me, Sherri, no, it's not an option for me. I need people today, and I can't wait 6 weeks or 6 months for this immigration journey. So they simply just put up a wall and said no. The second thing I kept hearing was, we just don't have the internal resources, the capacity to be able to take on an immigration project like this. And I get that. And there are resources. The third one was interesting when they would say to me, it doesn't work for us because foreign nationals don't speak English, and that won't work in our organization because, from a safety perspective and for other reasons, they can't speak English. And so then and there, I thought this is a message we need to demystify some of these barriers that are perceived and help people understand. And the best way to do that is to understand Canada's view on immigration. So here's a back history. Canada's immigration is based on roughly 3 broad categories. One of them is the humanitarian duty, refugee protection. Okay, this is, an interesting piece of our immigration. And back in 1969, I believe, is when Canada first signed their refugee convention, whereby we were, upholding a humanitarian duty to help and support refugees. In fact, we are the world leader in refugee protection. Let's be proud of that. And so in terms of humanitarian, we do uphold our humanitarian duties. And so when you think of people coming into our country, like Syrians, for example, people coming into our country now from Ukrainians, we do great work with Ukrainians, Afghanistan. So we are upholding our humanitarian duty. The second piece is reuniting families. It's a big piece of our immigration view, is that we want to make sure that people reunite with their families. So if I'm a foreign national, I'm now a Canadian citizen, I have family that's abroad and I want to bring them, there's an application process that allows me under the family class to bring in people. Further to that, Canada has this one particular program called Lonely Canadian. See, underneath the family class, you're allowed to bring in people that may be your spouse or your children, your dependent children, or your parents under the family class. That's a great thing. But further to that, we also have one called Lonely Canadian. And what that means is that if there's someone in Canada who's the only person, they have no family in Canada, there is the immigration program allows for somebody to bring in, regardless of if they're immediate family or not, under this program. So again, you'll see we have this side of the screen that really speaks to who we are as Canadians. And then thirdly, there's the economic development. Of course, we need to have and promote economic development in our country. And this is where we'll spend the most of our time today. One thing you'll find out, which will demystify some of the barriers that we spoke about briefly, was that English component. Under economic development, guys, English is key, and this is one of the things that is a criteria. So when I was speaking to those employers who were, sort of stumbling around immigration because they were worried about this, they really didn't understand economic development. So, I felt compelled to go back and help people understand the backdrop between our immigration system. So let's talk a little bit deeper about economic development. For foreign national to come into our country, they really are selected by their economic contribution to the labor market. So did you know that in 2021, over 50% of the immigrants in our country were admitted to our economic streams? Here's the numbers Jen was talking about. We hear it a lot, we see it a lot, but let's look at it a little bit further. What do these numbers mean? These numbers are actually allocated numbers for permanent residency applications, okay? Where our country says in 2022, we brought in over 431 permanent residents, or allowed 431,000 people to come in under that. We aim for 465,000 in 2023. These numbers do shift, but the pattern here is that we are increasing. Thirdly, we expect 485,000 in 2024, with 500,000 guys in 2025. That's 500,000 people that we expect to bring in at 2025. That is the largest number in 100 years. In fact, it's doubled since 2015. 2015 was around 250,000 people, but the astonishing thing is that it's 500,000 people, 100 years ago since we've seen these numbers before. So that says one thing to me. That says that the government is signaling to us that we need immigration. We need immigration for economic stability. We need to start thinking in terms of how we as organizations are going to start our immigration journey. But how does this work? I get it. It's a lot. It's a lot to uncover. We're going to help walk you through a few things, but I want to remind you of what I said in the beginning, that Jennifer will actually come and talk to us a little bit at the end about some other supports, about how we can dive a little bit deeper into some of these categories. So how do we start? First thing we need to do is we need to understand this law, this immigration thing. Immigration is based on law. It has an act and it has legislation called, and the act itself is called IRPA. Okay, we're big on acronyms in immigration, you'll see. And in order to understand, like every other legislation, it's very difficult to interpret. And so the government has put in regulations and bulletins that help guide the interpretation of the act for those visa officers, those immigration officers, and those border agencies who really need to understand how they need to abide by the act. The legislation, the regulations rather, will help them interpret. Public policy I bolded for a specific reason. There's a thing called public policy whereby IRCC makes temporary measures outside of the IRPA. And this is for very good reason. This is public to all of you. If you take a look after this, you'll look up public policy. You're going to see a lot of temporary measures that were put into place, and even measures that are expired, but they still sit on the public policy list. And let me give you an example. A public policy that would have been put into place back in 2020, 2021 during COVID would have been this. A person in Canada with a work permit or a visitor visa that may be expiring were left at a loss when COVID hit. It was very difficult to get, some of the applications processed. So the minister put in a public policy that said those people that are in Canada with expiring documents will be put on what they call a maintained status until we can get through these policies. So that's a really good example of how the public policies can help support some of the actions that are challenges that are happening in Canada. The second one would be, if you looked it up today, probably the top public policy would be what they call QAT, the Canadian Ukraine Authorization Travel Emergency Policy. And basically, this is a policy that allows those people that are in this Ukraine war, the Ukrainian citizens, to come into Canada and get a 3-year work permit. Temporary public policy. Doesn't necessarily fly under the act, but it's a public policy that the minister has put into place. In addition, you need to understand, and you should understand, the partners. So the partners at a glance are this: IRCC, Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada. These are the people who make the decisions. These are the visa officers, the immigration officers who actually make the decisions on all of the applications that are sitting before them. Canada Border Service Agency, CBSA. These are the tough guys. These guys have an important function. First of all, they man our borders. They protect our borders. So, thank you to that. Secondly, they will and they can produce work permits at the borders under certain circumstances and situations. Thirdly, being the tough guys and all, when we have people in our country who are out of status, and it's a big no-no to be out of status, these are the guys that go find them and deport them. Yes, they do. They deport them from our country. So they're a very important function in our immigration system. I'm sure you've all heard of Employment and Social Development Canada, ESDC, Service Canada, big role. And we're going to talk a little bit about more of what their function in a couple of slides. But just to say, this is a function where you'll see your job bank. They actually are the application. They provide the applications for the temporary foreign worker program, which we will go into detail. I know a lot of you out there are likely looking at the TFW program to fill some of your vacancies. Stay tuned. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But this department is responsible for approving your application for the TFW program. The provincial governments play a huge role. They actually have their own programs, the permanent pathway programs, where they can set their own guidelines for for permanent residency applications through provincial nominee programs. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the multicultural associations. These are associations that are funded by the federal government or the provincial government, and they help support the settlement of newcomers. And the importance of that role really helps and speaks to retention. So if you haven't reached out or don't understand where your multicultural associations are in your area, please do, and make that connection. So where do I begin? I know the law, I know the players. Here's where I hope you will put some stock into it. Take a picture, write down some notes. First thing you can do is some simple things to get started on your immigration journey. Conduct an internal needs analysis. Think about that. What do I actually need? Yeah, I know I need people. I need people to, to promote, to do my work, to satisfy our customers. But what does that mean? Do a deep dive. What skill do I need? How much can I pay? Do I need temporary or permanent? What programs are available to me? And how long will it take? Believe it or not, if you understand these things, you are well on your way. We're going to break down these in a few sections to help you sort through this. Poll question. Do you know your knocks? You might know what a knock is, but do you know your knocks in your organization? Yes or no? Still looking like Marwan.
I was on mute there. We're at, oh, yeah, answers is still trickling. Keep it open for me. All right. Closing out in a bit.
Awesome, thank you.
I go.
All right, what's it look like? Okay, again, 50-50 split. I'm loving this. That means a lot of you understand what your knocks are, which is a great place to be. And 45% of you don't, but guess what? That's why you're here, guys. So we're going to help you walk through what those are. So thank you. Thank you, Marwan. That's amazing. Thank you for those who answered. So let's walk through this very quickly. National Occupation Classification. That's what a knock is. Why is it important? We're going to talk about that. If not the most important thing, it is top of the top 3 things you should be understanding before you start your immigration journey. I'll start there. This is developed by ESDC. So your knock codes are set and are developed by ESDC Service Canada. So that's a very important job for them. It's an actual system that describes occupation and it gives them a number. Okay. So for example, if I'm working in a bakery, I know that my baker knock is 63202. Every job has a knock, every knock has a number. Why is this important? If you're applying for a TFW program and you put an ad out and you have a lot of people applying for not for this particular position, and you decide that there's nobody applying internally and they're all foreign nationals applying, so you want to go on a temporary foreign worker route, the first thing that will happen is that you will get denied if you have not done your homework on your knock. So if that doesn't make you sit up and take attention, I don't know what is. A denial on your application form. And the reason why, okay, here we go. In the knock, if you look it up, you're going to find it. In the knock, you're going to see that there's a number of things. One is main duties. One is educational requirements and several other things. But the important pieces here are main duties and median wage rates. Let's talk about that a little bit further. Your main duties are what describes your national occupation code. When you write your ads and your job descriptions, they really need to align with the national occupation classification that's outlined under Service Canada. Okay, if they don't, your applications will be denied. So we really need to drive that home. If you haven't already understand what your knock codes are, then you need to go do that, and you would be doing yourself a really good favor if you align those with your current job descriptions and you align them with your job ads. Why is the median wage rate important? Well, the median wage rate is extremely important because this is another area where you get caught up in a negative application. The job bank holds median wage rates. So if you go in and you put your knock code in the job bank, it'll tell you what the median wage rates are under labor market information. And they'll come out as low, medium, and high. In any application on immigration, specifically the temporary foreign worker application, you'll need to meet that median wage rate. If I'm an employer in New Brunswick looking for a baker and I apply and my median wage rate is below $15 an hour, I'm automatically denied. So if I were to leave you with this, know your NOC codes, know your regional wage rates per NOC, know your job descriptions and your information, build them around your NOC codes. And this is, you are halfway there, guys, in terms of getting yourself prepped and ready for your immigration journey. The next step will be finding the right pathway. I know this seems daunting. There are a number of them out there. And I'll show you another screen. I don't want you to get nervous about the screen, but this is something that is going to, the next couple of screens is going to kind of be eye-opening for you. When you're looking at your immigration programs, there's temporary ones, there's permanent ones, there's federal, there's provincial, there's both. There's some that require an LMIA. There's some that are LMIA exempt. Not to confuse you, but I want you to understand that there's a lot of them. So another poll question for you. Do you know what an LMIA is? Yes or no? LMIAs are an extremely important document. I would bet that some of you, most of you might know what they are. We're going to do a little bit deeper dive into that. What do we got, Marwan? %73% no. Great. 27% don't know what they are. Well, let's talk a little bit about it. Thank you, Marwan. So 75% know in a labor market impact assessment. You know that it's actually an application that's put forward to ESDC, Service Canada, to apply for a temporary foreign worker program. And that's a temporary employee. A positive LMIA application shows that you've demonstrated that there's no Canadian available to fill your position. And you also need to understand that it is a temporary measure. Typically 2 to 3 year work permits for that. Here's a slide that I just want to kind of go through a couple of things. If you look at the top and you're going to see pathways, there's a number of pathways, temporary pathways and permanent pathways down the side, okay? You're going to note that there's some for federal pathways, there's provincial pathways, there's LMIA pathways, there's LMIA exempt pathways. So let's look at the top line. TFW program, LMIA required, it's a temporary measure and it's federally driven. So there's a lot of different programs. We won't go through each one of them, but I want to go through a couple of different examples to show you the differences and then tell you where you can find them. So let's start here. Temporary Foreign Worker Program, TFW, another acronym, Labor Market Impact Assessment Required, LMIA, and there are a number of LMIA applications that could be required. You need to determine which one's fitting. Okay, which one do I use? The first thing you're going to need to do is understand the differences between the two. You could be looking at a low wage application, high wage, a seasonal, agricultural rather, or global talent stream, and there's others. These are the top ones that I've worked in, that are most common. And so some of the differences, just to give you an idea, obviously between low and high wage is an issue. Another difference would be the transportation cost. Under low wage, transportation cost is covered. Under high wage, it's not. So there are definitely some significant differences in these temporary foreign worker applications for you to understand before moving forward. But just know that there's some categories and that you can find them under the temporary foreign worker LMIA information under the IRCC website. There are ways to get in the country federally from a foreign national perspective that doesn't require a job. Interestingly enough, let's talk about that. The federal government has what they call express entry. It's an express entry profile, which means it's an electronic system that the foreign national will provide details and information about their background and hope for an invitation for permanent residency. Seems interesting. It seems quick. Not necessarily. Here's how it works. I'm a foreign national. I put in my information like my age, like my education, my language ability, my family, if I have family in Canada, etc. And each of the information components of the information I put in will give me points along the way. The higher the points, the better my chances. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean the higher my points in each category. For example, the higher my education level is, yes, the higher my points I might get points for. The lower my age rate will give me more points. So there's some subtleties there. But the idea is that every now and again, the federal government will do what they call a draw. And the draw for them is simply to allow a pathway in for some foreign nationals without a job to integrate into the Canadian system, the immigration system. So here's how it works. The Canadian government might decide next month that we need a number of trades in Canada. So they will do a draw for skilled trades, and they may say any foreign national who has express entry profile that qualifies under the skilled trades, the federal skilled trades program, and has a score of 500 and above, will automatically receive an invitation to apply for permanent residency. It's great. It happens a lot, but it's not necessarily the fastest approach to get in. It's certainly a way for foreign nationals to enter, for sure. One of the biggest questions I get around express entry is, what if you have a job? Well, interestingly enough, if I have an express entry profile as a foreign national and I end up getting a job from a provincial nominee program, I automatically can add that into my profile, and I automatically will be sent an invitation to apply. So what does that mean? You have a job, the better your chances. Simply to speak about the federal programs, I'd like to bring in Deepa here, because I think Deepa can add some value on the Francophone mobility program. Deepa, are you there? You can come in and talk to us a little bit about this.
Sure, thank you, Sherri, and hello and bonjour to everyone. So this Francophone mobility program, like you can see, it is an LMIA exempt program. So which means that you don't have to go through the pathway of LMIA getting lots of documentation to provide to the government in order to get an approval to do this kind of application. But this application is usually targeted to French speakers from Francophone countries such as Morocco, Algeria, Cameroon, France, Belgium. So these are targeted to these countries. But this doesn't mean that these candidates are only speaking French. They can be bilingual as well. And Francophone mobility program was introduced like 6 years ago in order to promote French language outside of Quebec. So in other words, you cannot hire someone to work in Quebec through this Francophone program. So it's only target all provinces other than Quebec. Now, another important thing to note about Francophone mobility program is that this is targeted for only skilled workers. So if ever you want to bring fill a labor position, so this program is not appropriate for that. You have to go through the LMIA route. But if ever you're targeting like supervisors, managerial positions, technical positions, so this is a very cost-effective and pretty quick way of bringing in foreign nationals. However, another important thing to note here is most of the candidates need to provide French test result. There are countries who are not required to provide test result, but there are others who might be required, and there is a language requirement. So during our bootcamp, we are going to go deeper into that, because I can just talk about this for hours and hours. There's so much to talk about. But just to let you know, this is a very cost-effective and a very fast process in order to bring candidates in. And say you have a candidate who's in French, you're offering them a position. So all you have to do is a very simple application, which is a date. And then you can send that candidate the employer compliance reference number, and they can get their work permit at the border, that is at the airport. So this is how quick it can be. It can be within a week. You can have the candidates in, depending on where the candidates are, of course. So if someone is in Morocco, you're looking at a processing time of maybe 2 to 4 months. Now with IRCC on strike, we might expect some delays there.
Thank you so much, Deepa. It's a great program, guys. If you have, a skilled position that you need to fill, this could be it. We had a foreign national that was actually visiting here in Canada, and she was hired as an HR professional. And she simply, after that very simple application form, she simply went to the local border and got her work permit. So it can work. There's some ways and around. It's just we wanted to highlight the fact that there are programs out there to support you in different ways. So to finish up the federal government, the responsibilities, as you may or may not know, the federal government is responsible for visitor visas, study permits, work permits. Let's pause there for a second. Work permits come in 2 forms, open or closed. What does that mean? Well, for example, a person coming in, a foreign national coming in to work for a company under an LMIA or under the provincial nominee program on a work permit, they would be closed work permits specifically tagged to that employer. They are not permitted to work anywhere else. An open work permit might be someone like a spouse who is accompanying the foreign national with the closed work permit. They're given an open work permit. So the differences between the open and work permits can be of value. I have clients call a lot that will say, can this person work for me? Here's the work permit. Clearly it's an open work permit. Absolutely they can. So there's a little bit of information for you. Permanent resident applications is certainly a responsibility under the federal government, and of course, citizenship. Let's roll into provincial government. Interestingly enough, provincial government have a lot of PR pathways. They are all unique and varying criteria. I'm going to go through a couple. So each province has the ability to create their own provincial sort of criteria under their programs. I'm going to show you 2, and then we'll look at the differences between the 2 so you get the idea. So under the Ontario Immigration Nominee Program, OINP, called In-Demand Skills. Again, Ontario has many. This is one of them called In-Demand Skills. To give you an idea of what that would look like, it is a permanent pathway application. The person must the company must have a job offer for the foreign national that's in a certain NOC code. So back to those NOC codes. In this particular case, I believe it is construction and agricultural, okay? So these NOC codes, there might be a few more, but the job offer has to be under those NOC codes, and it has to be full-time, not seasonal. Interestingly enough, the Ontario government says, I want to make sure that the foreign national coming in has 9 months experience out of their last 3 years in Ontario. What does that mean? It means that the person coming in either has to have had experience previously working in Ontario, maybe on an LMIA, for example. They really are looking for someone who has experience already in the province. And the last thing that they look at under this is their high school equivalent ECA diploma. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, but just know that there is an education component to this. Now look at that in contrast with provincial nominee program in New Brunswick, just to give you an idea how each province is able to define their own pathways. Again, permanent pathway. Must have a job offer in specific NOCs. This is much more liberal in terms of the NOC codes that are eligible. Certainly laborers are eligible under the skilled worker program. They put an age component, 19 to 55. You have to be eligible under this program. Certainly a high school diploma with an ECA. 1 year out of the last 5 years experience in terms of the job that they're doing. So 1 year in the NOC code. Doesn't have to be in New Brunswick, doesn't even have to be in Canada. It can be from their own country. The idea is that they have 1 year experience in the NOC code that they are applying for. And of course, a language test under this category of a Canadian language bench level of 4. Again, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but I wanted to show you the different contrasts. Each province has many PNP programs. And if you're looking to understand what yours are in your province, please look up, if you're in British Columbia, look up British Columbia PNP program. You'll find out what programs are available to you and put that in your immigration, your immigration journey, put it in and log it so you know what particular pathway might be open for you. Touch briefly, both provinces, provincial and federal government partner in pilot programs. The Atlantic Immigration, you may have heard of it. It's one of the recent ones that have just been moved from a pilot into a permanent program. Rural and Northern Immigration Program and Yukon Community Immigration Program pilot. And these are really built to support regional areas that really demonstrate the need to have people come in because of the really low labor market and the vacancies in their area, and not a lot of people. So really rural areas coming in. And the applications, the criteria under these seem to be pretty reasonable. So again, give it a look if these are your areas to see if you may qualify for this. So let's talk about bridging work permits very quickly. I have a few more slides and then we'll move into questions in a bit. So bridging work permits are extremely important. When we talk about provincial nominee programs, we talked a lot about being permanent resident pathways, right? We want them here permanently. So one might think that if you're nominated in the province for a job, then you sit where you are in your country until you get permanent residency. That's not the case. When you are nominated for when a foreign national is nominated for a program on a provincial nominee program in your province, they are issued a nomination certificate. Additionally, they're issued a work permit support letter. This will allow them to apply for a work permit to come into the country to work while they're waiting for permanent residency. Just want to clarify that. We get a lot of questions on that. So a bridging work permit is very important in your endeavors when you're looking at bringing people in quickly. The other thing that we want to talk about very briefly is common documents. If you're looking at bringing people in, you really should be in tune with what we're looking for PR, permanent resident ready documents. Really, there's several, but here are a few of the top ones. If an individual is looking to come in as a foreign national, they really should be looking at getting an IELTS or a CELPIP or a TEF test. TEF is the French test. They really need to have this document. They need to have an education credential assessment, which actually assesses their education in terms of their equivalency to Canadian standards. So let me give you an example. If I'm from Philippines, and I'm applying for a food processing labor type position, and I present my documents and I have a CELPIP, I have a CLB level that's suitable. So I have a language test that pass. But I have a grade 12 education. I send that in to get it assessed. The assessment may come back, likely if it's from the Philippine area, it'll come back as that it's not equivalent to grade 12, and therefore the application is denied. So one of the things that you should remember is that if you're ever going into different countries, really get a little bit of a feel of the education credentials. In terms of Filipinos now, we look for secondary education. 1 year post-secondary education will drive that up to a suitable standard equivalent to Canadian standards. Another PR ready document, we call it document, and that is the experience in the NOT code that they're applying for. This could come in the form of reference letters, but in any application, you're likely going to need the experience in the NOT code that you're looking for. Why does this matter to you? First and foremost, you want to understand how important it is to ensure that your applicants, your foreign nationals that you're looking at, have the credentials that they need to be certainly pathway for permanent residency ready. So you want to make sure that that happens. And secondly, it will help you with your recruitment process. If you're in a country and you're looking for, you have two applicants, and one applicant is from one country and the other applicant is from another, and you know that the credentials from one company might be easier to get assessed, then you may tip the scale and go to that. To that foreign national based on the country alone. So PR ready documents are very important. Many times now when we're doing our recruitment, the first thing we ask people do you have your permanent residency documents? And believe it or not, foreign nationals know more about our system than we do. So 9 times out of 10, they know what they need, and they're either starting on it or they're certainly thinking about it. Couple more slides here, very important. Processing timelines is certainly something that people are interested in understanding. And I will tell you guys that this can shift, and it probably has changed in the last 24 hours. But here's some good guidelines. An LMIA application typically takes 8 to 12 months. 8 to 12 weeks to get approved. Okay, that is once the application is submitted. There's a lot of upfront work that needs to get done that could be 4 or 5 weeks before the submission, but after the submission, it could be 8 to 12 weeks before you will get an answer back if you're approved. There are some exceptions. The Global Talent Stream is one, and this is a 10-day application process. Provincial program nominee, so PMP programs typically take about 8 weeks. This could vary from province to province, but once the nomination certificate application has gone in, typically takes about 8 weeks to get a reply. Work permits are an interesting topic. So work permits application processing times depend on the country. You can find it today if you go look up processing times. Go look in processing times, you sort through what country you're looking for, and you'll be able to understand what the processing times for that country. This will help you in your foreign recruitment. If you're looking at getting people sooner than later, you'll look at the processing times. Interestingly enough, I went on this morning and the processing times in various countries have lowered, so that's a good sign. Permanent resident applications somewhere between 12 to 24 months, and it really just depends on a lot of things. One is the program. Second is what's happening in the world, COVID, strikes. You just never know what's going to happen with processing timelines, but this will give you a good idea when you're thinking about building your immigration plan. The last couple of slides I'm going to leave you with are some best practices. If you are looking at bringing people in, get your plan ready, understand your not codes, and then look at what are some low-hanging fruit, some fast processes that I could adopt or dive into to help with my initiative. Search your processing times. What countries can I bring people in quicker? Do my foreign nationals have the documents they need? Are they PR ready? Visa exempt countries are a very good way to bring in people quicker. When people come into the country to work, they need 2 documents. One is a visa travel document, the other is a work permit. If you can find a country that's visa exempt, which is 70 countries maybe across the country, they won't need, across the world that are actually visa exempt to Canada, they will not need this visa to travel. What they'll need is an electronic travel authorization that takes about 10 days to get. So if that's the case, they can travel on the ETA, they can then get their work permit at the border at the port of entry when they arrive. A lot quicker process. Visit your visa exempt countries, see if your foreign nationals are coming from there. And of course, global talent stream is somewhat low-hanging fruit. The challenge with the global talent stream, yes, the LMIA application could be approved in 10 days. The unfortunate thing is that they're for high skilled only. $80,000 a year jobs will qualify under the global talent stream LMIA. Francophone mobility, Deepa talked to, this is actually a really good way to bring people in fairly quickly. Low-hanging fruit, consider postgraduates. They're in the country. When they finish school, they're given 2 to 3 year work permits. This is a really good way of finding and getting postgraduates integrated into your company while you decide if it'll work out, and you can bring them in under permanent resident streams to keep them. But remember, when you have people applying from foreign nationals applying, give a look to see if they have Canadian school, because they still may be in the country and you may be able to hire them. Just don't disregard them from a timing perspective. LMIA applications can be used, as you know, for temporary routes. It also can be used while people are, if you're foreign national, it doesn't have their documents for permanent residency, bring them in under an LMIA application whereby those PR documents are not needed, and let them and allow them to work on getting their documents while they're working for you temporarily. And of course, multicultural associations is a really good area to find maybe spouses that have open work permits that may be willing or want to work in your organization. So some of the best practices that I'm going to hand over to Darcy to talk a little bit about his journey. Darcy, are you there?
I'm here.
Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Sherri, for the warm introduction. Great to be here today to talk about my experience in immigration. And I just wanted to point out that Sherri and I have known each other a long time, as she previously mentioned earlier. And some of the learnings that I took from Sherri way back in 2007, when I moved to another geographic region, I was actually looked up by another organization who said, hey, can you help us with our immigration, which I couldn't do at the time because I didn't have my own business. But I passed the learnings that Sherri gave to me on to them. they embarked on the journey. So that's the power of these types of sessions, where you can share your knowledge and your information with many people. So what I wanted to do today is I just want to talk about who I am and what I do, and then also share practical tips that I've learned in immigration along the way. So Sherri mentioned I have my own consulting business. My company is Levitate HR Strategies, Inc. I'm based in the greater Moncton, New Brunswick area, and I specialize in human resources and also occupational health and safety consulting. So I do both. I had an 18-year career in the private sector prior to going out on my own in manufacturing, agriculture, and transportation. And I've had experience in operations, HR, and health and safety. So that's a little bit about my company and who I am and what I do. So just to talk about the immigration experience that I have. Starting out, started on the journey in 2007, and I was involved in immigration right up until 2021. I've handled upwards to about 30 files as an internal consultant with a couple of different organizations, and also in the food space, just to make it relevant. And I've handled files from plant workers all the way up to PhD level candidates. So we've had plant workers, I've immigrated engineers, I immigrated a plant breeder with a PhD in plant breeding. So I use global talent, I use express entry, I use programs that require a straight labor market impact assessment. So I have a good knowledge and understanding of the process, and I just want to share some practical tips with people so they can get a sense for what this looks like. So Sherri talked about some of the legislation and knock codes and so on and so forth up until this point. But the first thing I want to talk about is creating the business case. If you're on this call, you'll probably have to create a business case for this, and that business case can be two things. It could be the internal business case that you need to put in front of your manager, owner, or whoever that top-ranking person is in your organization for immigration, or you may have to create the business case for IRCC or Service Canada. When you're doing that, one of the areas that I've had success with in creating that business case is talking about how we're going to feed the world. If you look at statistics that talk about food in 2040 and 2050, the years, you will see staggering statistics from economic experts, industry experts, that there's going to be a food shortage starting in 2040, going up to 2050, because of the fact that the population continues to grow and there's less and less people either in the food processing sector or in the primary food sector. So when you're creating that business case, it's always helpful to drip some of that. How are we going to feed the world? This is necessary for us to be good corporate citizens and ensuring our ability to help feed the world. And although it's not required on a labor market impact assessment application, it also doesn't help to drip some of that on a labor market impact assessment to say statistics will show that there's going to be a food shortage in 2040. Even though that's outside the wage rate and all the pertinent information that you're going to have to put on there, dripping some of that is a good idea. The second part I want to talk about is your talent strategy. So many organizations have a talent strategy. Some organizations don't. Everybody has a talent strategy, whether it be in writing or something that doesn't exist in writing. You should use immigration, and you should think about immigration as a way to either supplement or complement your current talent strategy. And because you may get asked the question, if you're trying to sell this internally or to somebody else, and I've been asked this question myself, Darcy, is this going to solve our problems? You'll want to be cautious as to how you answer that, because it isn't the be all end all, and it won't likely solve all your challenges, but it's a great start, and it's a great supplement, and it's a great complement to your current program. Okay, so I would like everybody to keep that in mind. The third one is management support. Like all programs, it has to be supported by management. They need to get in behind it. They need to make sure that they're on board, not only with the cultural change that will need to go along with bringing in a new workforce that's different from the current one you have, but also there are some costs involved. And the people that make decisions in those organizations they're going to have to understand those costs both before people land on the ground, during the landing of the ground on the ground, and then after they're here. Sherri talked a little bit about that, the difference between high wage and low wage. One requires housing support, the other doesn't. Housing support's a cost. You have to be aware of that. Sherri talked about the knock code, so I'll pass over that because Sherri gave a great allude into the knock codes. But what I'll say is this: if you aren't familiar with knock codes, you've probably got those pesky surveys that Statistics Canada sends over to you, and you probably ignore it time and time again, and then they call you and beg you to complete the survey. Those surveys are not always a waste of time. That will force you to get familiar with your knock codes, because those surveys oftentimes will talk about knock codes. So if you get that request from Statistics Canada, again, that asks about your labor force, take a look at that survey. It's a forced way for you to get familiar with your knock codes if you don't have time to sit down in front of a computer and look at your knock codes. So I want to talk a little bit about now that we're past that piece of immigration, we're getting into, okay, now we've made the decision. Now we're going to embark on the immigration journey. There's a couple of tips that I want to talk about. So the first one is the application. Some of the lessons that I've learned over the years, they've been some of them have been tough lessons. I'll admit that right out the gate. So on the application, oftentimes organizations or whoever's completing those applications will they will save those applications in a drive, and the reason being is because the first page and a half, 2 pages of those applications are all the same. It's all the same information. It's the name of your business, the address, the Canada payroll number, the date you've been incorporated, the contact people. So then when your next one comes and your next LMIA is required, you just grab that same application and then you delete out the information that's pertinent. And then you leave the first page and a half to 2 pages. I would caution people from doing that consistently and continuously. The reason why is because even though it'll save time on the front end, oftentimes those applications, they get updated and they get loaded onto Service Canada's site and they don't tell anybody. If you take the time to fill out a 20 or 25 page application and that application is not the right or the current version without your knowledge, they will send that application back. And they will say, this is not the right application. We have a new version, here's a new version, and then you'll have to start the LMIA application over again. So just, if you're embarking on that journey, just make sure you get in the habit of always taking the application from the site itself, because then you have a case then that if it's kicked back to you, you can say, well, I took the most recent application, this is where I got it, and it was the most recent application that was loaded on the website. So just keep that in mind. Source countries. The source country is very, very important for a couple of reasons. Number one, the skill set that you're hiring for. Number two, the language. And 3 is climate. So Sherri talked about language earlier on in her presentation, and she was bang on when she talked about how there's a lot of challenges early on in 2005 about companies being very skeptical about how is someone going to integrate into our culture that doesn't speak the language, which at the time was a valid concern, but was a myth, to Sherri's point. However, in my experience, the people who either come with the language or have a motivation to learn the language are the ones who are going to integrate the best. They will integrate quicker, they will integrate better, they will integrate more efficiently, and they are likely the ones that will stay. Climate is important because if you have somebody who comes to your organization and they've never experienced a winter before, okay, let alone Canadian winter, let's park Canadian winter. They've never seen snow before. A Canadian winter may, I'm not saying it will, it may be a shock to them. It may be a big culture shock. They may come with no winter clothes. They may come with a lot of preconceived notions of what that looks like. You'll want to take a look and you'll want to consider your climate. I'm not saying you make decisions based on climate. I'm just saying that you want to consider the climate that they're coming from. So those are 2 areas that you'll want to look at. You want to look at language, you want to look at climate, and then also skills. Are they coming from an area or a business in their home country where they have the skills? So look at those three pieces of information before making your decision. Labor market impact assessment compliance. This is an area that I talked about learning some tough lessons. Some of them were more pleasant than others for sure, but to make a long story short, LMIA compliant advertising to prove that there's no Canadian that's available for that job means a number of things. And Service Canada or IRCC sets out what that means. If you put an ad out there and you think it's LMIA compliant, if one of those mediums that you were required to advertise on, if that ad expires, the clock starts over. So for example, if you have to advertise an LMIA compliant ad for 30 days, and one of the mediums that's required is the job bank. If you post that originally for 14 days, and on day 15, you forget to extend it, the clock starts over. You will have to repost everything. And that can be a huge setback when it comes to individuals and people getting on the ground. So I just want everybody to keep that in their mind. Also reputation, like negative reviews, you'll read about trips and products that you buy and services that you see online or that you receive online. A lot of the things you may hear about immigration tend to be negative, but to Sherri's point and my point, we've had great success with it, either doing it as an internal consultant or helping other customers as an external consultant. So I would encourage you to embark on reaching out to a professional who's got the experience in it, because you are going to get bombarded likely by a lot of negative talk and perceptions in the marketplace. So just keep that in mind. My last point is invite people to your facility and your site that can assist and support making decisions. So if you have an MP, if you've got an MLA, and they've never been to your site, invite them out and give them a tour. We were in a situation a number of years ago where we were trying to secure foreign workers. We had no bus route that was available. We were in a place where there was a high cost of living, and we couldn't automate. The prevailing wage rate was a little bit lower than what the prevailing wage rate was at the time that was posted. So our wage rate was lower. Initially, we were told no. You don't have permission for the LMIA. It's not a positive LMIA. However, we invited those people out to take a tour of our facility. And like the saying goes, a picture paints 1,000 words. And if we didn't invite them for that tour, so that they could get a feel for, okay, there's no bus route here. Oh, that could be challenging. Oh, okay, I can see now why you can't automate. I can see that's a challenge. We ended up getting approval just by doing that. So those are the tips that I've learned that are some practical tips along the way. And I just wanted to share those with everybody, and I will hand it back to Sherri to continue her presentation.
Darcy, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Look, there's so many good points. I wanted to tag along on two more, and I know we're getting up there in time, but I think it's worth noting your point about the weather, the climate is so important. It got to the point where, I mean, now employers, for certain positions, like for example, we were looking for truck drivers for one of our food processors, and they were looking for a truck driver, and they wanted to go to countries that were very warm in climate, and we began to think about that. If they've never driven in the snow, it's probably not going to be a good idea. So our team, as we go out and we do recruitment missions across the globe, and we're looking for specific, we want to understand if climate will be an issue, specifically in those warm countries. We would make fun, like we would have fun with it, and we would say to them, have you ever built a snowman? And they would love it, and most of them would say no, but I want to, which is great. So yeah, climate, as much as it seems trivial, it's not. It's a big deal to help people integrate in, and you'll get their understanding if they're up for it or not. The second piece that you brought up was the immigration, the LMIA, the component. The LMIA application application process is a beast, and there's a lot to it. It's not rocket science. It's just a lot of information and a lot of components that you can't miss one or things fail. And so, you know, that secret that I was telling you about earlier, Jennifer is going to come out and talk to you in a few minutes about what's up and coming through the Food Processors Association that might just help you on that front. So we'll pause that for now, and we'll pick it up in a few minutes. So last thing I want to leave with you, a couple of slides left. And one is, Sherri, what's the most common question that you get? You know, and this is it. This is the common question. What is the most common impediment for a company on their immigration journey? So what is that biggest hurdle? And I thought about this long and hard some time ago to be able to articulate it. And it comes down to one word: strategy. For those companies that I visited back in the day that didn't pull the trigger because of so many reasons, I still see that every day. And mostly it's now just based on timing. They want them tomorrow, and they need them now. They can't wait for the time frame. But I will tell you, 9 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 companies will come back to me and say, Sherri, I wish I had started last year, because they know that they should have in order to be you know, further along and they are today. So one helpful hint: make this part of your strategy. Start thinking about it now. Start building those components to, you know, to help your immigration journey. And, you know, you'll be happy that you did, because this labor market challenge isn't going away. 5-10 years, we're still going to be experiencing this. So please take note in that and start your journey. The last thing I'll leave with you is the resource page that I promised I'd leave you with. Immigration lawyers, immigration consultants, multicultural associations, ESDC, Service Canada has a 1-800-LMIA line. If you have a question on your LMIA, how great is that? Very difficult sometimes to find numbers that you can actually call people today. They have one. I've used it many times. I have a question on my LMIA. Am I filling this out properly, or something has changed? Those are things that you can ask them. Other employers are a great resource. If you know that there's an employer that has, you know, worked, done immigration, and they have a lot of history, they can give you a lot of best practices. And lastly, research. This is a big, immigration is huge. Even lawyers and consultants who know a lot about it still have to do a lot of research. Things change very quickly, and you have to stay on top of it. And every time we, you know, start on a different journey, a different application, you know, we have questions that people will ask, we may have to look it up too. It's definitely things that completely change. And there's just so much volume of information that no one can be expected to keep it all up here. The best thing that you can do is just get used to researching things and stay on top of what you need. Once you find a couple of immigration pathways, and then you start your journey and you do it a few times, you'll be old hat at it. You'll have it down pat. So I leave you with that. I am going to pass it over to Jennifer. Jennifer, are you here?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Sherri. Oh my gosh, this was amazing. And Darcy and Deepa, this was, oh my gosh, so much information.
Yes.
Information overload. It is really, really good. And we have some awesome questions for you guys coming up soon. So we'll see how many we'll be able to get through. But we want to let everyone know who's on the call and get advanced kind of notice that we're going to hold the Immigration Ready Bootcamp workshop. For those of you who maybe have never gone through the immigration process before, looking into foreign recruitment and workers, we want to offer that opportunity to those companies first who are looking to bring on some new workers, or at least get all the information that you may need. And we're starting that May 16th to June 13th. It's going to be a 5-week program, boot camp. So it's going to be 1 week after another. So I think it's going to be like every Tuesdays at 1 p.m. You'll see that soon. So it will be a first come first serve. We're going to have 25 employer spots available. And then as well with that, we're also going to offer you a 1-hour one-on-one consultation with Sherri and the team as well. So that is something that FPSC is putting on. We really want to help you to navigate that world and that area. And we think this would be a great resource and way to get everyone more integrated with our immigration system and hopefully get some other sources of labor through the pipeline. Like Darcy said, we know it's not the end all be all to everything, but it is one avenue and way that we can definitely get more folks in our facilities. So that's Immigration Ready Bootcamp. What we're going to do is send you a link as soon as it's live. We're just finishing up the registration website for that and platform. So we're looking for those employers who potentially haven't really embarked upon that process to go there. So 25, it's across Canada, it's open to everyone. We do know that Quebec might be a bit different, but Deepa's from Quebec and hopefully be involved there as well to help facilitate any Quebec folks on who want to join the workshop. And then if this goes well, we can continue to have these and then maybe even do a Quebec specific one for French speaking individuals. So we've got a plan and we want to start with this, but it will be offered to those on the webinar first. You'll get a direct link to register and sign up for that. So yes, we're excited. So let's jump into some of the questions here that we have. Start off, we have Bill Langdon first. Bill Langdon Fisherman's Market, a locally owned seafood company in Nova Scotia. I've been bringing in foreign workers for about 12 years. I had recently 2 individuals rejected. Reason is that our government is not satisfied that workers will return to the Philippines after the 2-year work permit expires. These 2 workers already have family working for me, and both are young university workers. These are people that we need in our country. So the question is, why would IRCC reject this application?
Well, I'm going to take that one because this is a perfect question. Thank you for it, because it just will illustrate the complexities of this program. Okay, we talked back, Bill. We talked earlier on about the IRPA and about the legislation around it. Okay, and the interpretation. Okay, if you will, a lot of officers make decisions based on what they feel is the interpretation of IRPA. So in this particular situation, maybe it was a border agency. I don't know all the details, but if it was a CBSA officer, I've seen people at the border be turned away. CBC officer may look at the person and say, I don't think that you're going to return. Maybe the people had, it's typically people who are single, university, well-educated people coming in under an LMIA. They will give them a bit more scrutiny because they believe that they will overstay once the position is finished, and or in some cases, they believe that they're actually not there to do the job. And let me give you an example. I'm not saying it's the case in this case, but I do know this is a couple of times that this has happened. Brought in somebody to work at a food processing line. She was turned away at the border because she had long fingernails. She was well dressed, and they just didn't think because of her demeanor that she would be doing food processing labor type work. So they denied her at the border. That's their right as an officer. So each officer has the right to make a decision based on their interpretation and what they see in front of them. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult. The last one I'll leave you with is that there was an individual bringing a family coming over temporarily, and they brought their newborn with them. The newborn was rejected at the border. The family was permitted to go, but the newborn was rejected. And of course, one of the family members stayed behind. And you know what the officer's comment was, and the idea was that if the family had a place to come back to, something to come home to, they were sure to come back home and they weren't going to overstay. Blows your mind. It happens. Deepa, anything there you want to add?
Yeah, so here, what I can assume for sure is these 2 candidates are in Philippines right now. And the fact that they have their family members here, so they have a stronger ties to Canada. So that has been a reason for refusal. So the LMI should be valid. Actually, the LMI is valid for 18 months right now. So what I would suggest is redo the application with like a compelling submission letter to say, like, you know, there's so much we can say, but it's best if we can have a consultation and discuss further. But there are solutions, yeah, because the LMI is still valid, it can be used again.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well. even though on the labor market impact assessment, that's a standard form with a bunch of boxes that you need to complete, but you only have so many characters. There's nothing stopping you from attaching an addendum to explain additional information if you feel is warranted. So I've had to do that in a few cases, and to Deepa's point, it might be a case where you just attach in a letter, and in the notes say, please see attached letter, and you explain with more commentary what you're trying to do.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
but the bottom line is there is solution. It can
That's
work
right.
around. Yeah.
That's right.
Hey, all right, we're gonna try to do rapid fire here. There's a lot of questions. See if we can get through them. I'm concerned about potential skills gap. What's the best way to do a compatibility analysis for roles that are NOC communicated, but are communicated differently in internal job pools and environments?
Yeah, see, I'll answer that very quickly because it's a very difficult one. I think what this question is that sometimes not codes don't exactly match the job, right? And so I think we've had to do this before, and I think really back to just what was talked about. You really need to be very, very clear, and if there's subtleties that we're going to be rejected because of how it's written, note it why. Right? This is why it's this way and it's not that way. Think of it that there's always somebody on the other end that doesn't know anything about you or your organization. The more information you can give them, the better. That will help your case. The second thing, ESDC needs to update their NOC codes and add more to it. And we need to start making a case, and it would hurt to make a case to them to say, we need to update these.
Actually, we got an email recently to be a part of that panel. They're going to be updating them on a regular basis. So we can actually funnel and feed some of these NOC codes or things that we think that are required through this panel. It's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
We can do that. Okay, next one. As an employer, can I share my immigration employees with other employers?
Absolutely not. As long as if they're tied to you in that closed work permit, you cannot. Okay, whether it's even through the LMIA process or permanent or temporary. But here, there's always a way. You just have to redo the paperwork. So if they want them and you want to move them over to them, then the other company needs to make application. There's more to it than that, but there is a way. But
that's right.
Question, no.
That's right.
Okay, good. There are tons of outsourcing companies that seem to fall under less than favorable wage employment practices internationally. What is the best way for me to avoid these pitfalls with international temporary foreign worker recruitment?
Yeah, look, you got to do your due diligence, and it's difficult when they're outside of the country because we as Canadian immigration, we don't have any they have no impact on that, right? And the last thing you want to do is be associated with a company who's actually charging an arm and a leg in another country to the foreign national. It's a very sad thing. Internally, we have much more control. So, I would be cognizant of that. One thing you could just do your due diligence, ask them, talk to the employee, interview the employee and ask them questions, find out what they're, so you don't necessarily have to use immigration firms that are outside the country. There are plenty inside the country that can help, and you can do your own recruitment. We can let you know in the webinar series how you can do that.
Yeah, good.
Can I add to that one, or how are we doing for time?
Yeah, we're way over time, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, I just wanted to add 2 points to that. So the first one is when you're ensuring like skill gaps and labor standards, like Sherri said, there's no way for us to control that, but there's a couple of things that I've done in the past as an internal consultant. So if you want to ensure skill gaps in that, let's say a baker in one country is the same as a baker in another. We used a platform where we had the employees upload videos of themselves performing a specific task. So for example, if the role requires the person to grade potatoes or peel potatoes at a table, then go get one of the tasks was get a few potatoes and grate it at your countertop and send us a video so that we know that we can see your hands, we can see that your hands can function, and you can perform the task. So that's one way to ensure the skills. The other part on the safety piece is just don't assume that individuals will know if they're working below a standard. So for example, I'll give you a really, really easy example on the safety space. The employees that come to Canada are not going to have CSA approved shoes. because what they're wearing is not CSA approved, it's purchased in another country. So if you don't tell them that, they're not going to know that, and you may not even think of it. So you have 10 workers that show up, they've got safety shoes, you think they're fine, they have an accident, a foot gets crushed, oh, their shoe's not CSA approved, you're in trouble. So just make sure you don't assume.
Wow, good example. Awesome. Okay, I heard recently that the ECA was no longer necessary in the permanent residency pathway. Is this true?
Well,
No,
I-
not true.
No. Well, and the question, I was going to say, Deepa, you do a lot of these PR applications, so you can take that one.
Yeah, it's not true. Yeah. No matter what immigration pathway right now, ECA is a requirement.
The only caveat,
Unless a person has studied in Canada, then no. But if they have foreign education, then for sure they will need that.
yeah, so there are some caveats there. So overall, though, yes, you'll need it.
Okay, perfect. Are settlement agencies any help in this process? Is it worth talking to them?
Well, some of the process for settlement agencies, actually, some of the programs require you to use settlement agency for plans before they'll even. So that's again, each are different. But look, I've heard some back and forth, but I think it's very positive to work with agencies to help support. That's what they do, right? And in terms of helping you go through an application, they're not equipped or regulated to do so from an application perspective. So unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to do that for you.
Right. Okay, good. Why is Sandra Purdy? Why on a work permit application with an approved LMIA in the temporary foreign worker category would I get a letter just extending the existing permit for an additional 3 months instead of providing a new work permit?
Processing doesn't make sense. Just a letter. They'll ask you to staple it into your work permit, and that's just your new document. You know how, I don't know if it's in New Brunswick, we get our new our registrations of our cars, just a piece of paper. It's simply just, I think, a processing decision.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. Let me see. I would like to know if this is Tammy. I would like to know if there's a better way to hire temporary foreign workers for food production positions other than the low wage LMIA route.
Depends on the province that you're from. I don't pretend to know all of the provincial nominee programs. Some of them, like New Brunswick, will allow the entry level, we'll call them entry level. They're called different tiers now underneath the NOC system, or low skill, D, just several names for them. Some provincial programs will allow them. So I would say go through your provincial nominee, depending on the province you're in, and see if there are some that will allow, entry level type positions or that way. And if not, PFW, I guess.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so this will probably be our last one. We are looking into put 2 of our Jamaican workers on a 2-year contract. It is my understanding that they can bring their immediate families over with them. What is the processing time to make that happen? My husband is a sole proprietor of a wild blueberry farm. We have been using foreign workers from Jamaica for approximately 15 years, and without them, our farm would not be functioning today.
Well, I'm going to partially answer that, and then I'll have Deepa or Darcy add if they need to. But so there's 2 questions here. One is the family, and the other is the processing times. Okay, so let's deal with the family. You remember I talked about public policy, and there's some changes sometimes. Well, our new minister, Sean Fraser, has made a new change to the process whereby when a foreign national is coming in under temporary measures under an LMIA, there was a time they weren't able to bring their spouses. He made that change. He believes in reuniting families. He allows the family to come in. So that's a good thing. So I can answer that. As far as processing timelines, I haven't looked up Jamaica, so I don't know what the processing times are. I'm pretty sure they're not a visa exempt country, so I assume they have to wait for the work permits. Deepa, do you?
Yeah, so previously, I mean, before January 2023, so only skilled workers were allowed to bring their partners and their kids to Canada. But since January of this year, so if your employee is in a semi-skilled position, so their spouses are allowed to get an open work permit as well.
But the timing, I don't think that there's any way of fast tracking it. It's an LMIA. If they're either the only fast tracked opportunities are through visa exempt countries. Really, unless you guys know of anything different.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that, Sherri. The only piece that I want to say is sometimes, we talk about source countries and how long it takes to process under that certain country. But if the individual has been someone that's worked in many countries, the more countries they've worked in, the longer it's going to take. So in this question, they mentioned Jamaicans, but if those people worked in many countries, it's going to take longer because they've got to do the checks in all the countries.
It could, yep. So it's very difficult. I would say look up Jamaica processing timelines, and that'll give you a good idea.
Good. Okay, one last question, and I guess it's the AIP program, so it's right up your alley. What are the major responsibilities of the designated employer under the AIP to their international employees?
Well, I'm not sure what that question means. Can you read it again, Jen? Sorry.
What are the major responsibilities, I guess, of the employer to their international employees?
Okay, so look, the Atlantic Immigration, I hope I can answer your question. So if not, please follow up in the question box. But the Atlantic Immigration is very similar to the provincial nominee program in New Brunswick shared earlier. And that really is that the responsibilities would be from the employer, essentially is they need to be designated. So they have to do their part in the designation. They have to pay a compliance fee of $248. Other than that, they have to be, reasonably responsible to help them find some housing. They're not necessarily, they don't have to pay for it. So I think it's low. The responsibilities for the employer is low when it comes to that program.
That's right. I believe on the most recent letters that I would have done prior to June 2022 was the letter indicates you have a job for them in the time period that it states, so 2 years. You're being factual at the job that they're performing. So if you've hired them for a pricing coordinator, you don't have them doing a different job. And the 3 points that Sherri just discussed, usually that letter that covers 4 or 5 points is fine.
Wonderful. All right. I think that brings us to the end of our questions. This was really, really great. Sorry to everybody if we went over your time, but everyone will get a follow-up email. Or Marwan, did you want to explain the follow-ups on how we're going to give everybody the information?
Yeah, for sure. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to put in the questions. And what's going to happen now is that for any questions that weren't answered there, if there's any follow-ups, just please feel free to place them into the Q&A. We'll follow up via email for those questions in their entirety and also share a recording of this call. Another thing that I also noticed is that Sherri was referring to Eddie's presentation throughout there. So we'll also place a link for you guys to watch that webinar if you had missed it. And as always, keep posted to what's coming up next. We'll also include that into the email. So you will be receiving that from us, and just follow up with us if there's any information that you guys might need outside of that. Okay.
All right. And we'll have the link for the registration for the boot camp as well.
Yes, sign up.
That's correct. Yes.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next month. It'll be May 25th. Well, for the next webinar.
Yay.
All right, Cole, we have a great speaker lined up for you coming up on May 25th, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Great to meet all of you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Have a
Thanks,
good one, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.